Hello and welcome to another episode of the Big Ideas Show. Today in the studio I have Kevin Batchelor.
Hello.
Hello. And Lauretta Kavanagh.
Hello.
Hello. And today's discussion, we're going to be talking about language and mental health and kind of where they cross over, where they mix, where they come together really. But before we get onto that, I wanted really just to open up the discussion around this discussion, if that makes sense. Because the Big Ideas Show is about having these open discussions. We've taken a very big topic and merged two big topics really. And today's not about finding the answer. It's not about, we'll kind of get onto what you both do kind of on your day-to-day basis. But today's hopefully about exploring the edges of what we know, and kind of coincidentally one of the topics being language and how we can use language and this sort of open discussion to explore. So I guess I wanted to ask you two both what you see as a possibility for this discussion today and what you hope to get out of it. Who should I go to? I'm gonna look to Kevin first. I introduced you first, so I'm sorry.
You did,
first.
so it's my turn first. Okay.
The
possibility of this is that, and Lauretta mentioned it off air before, is that actually people start talking about mental health, both on the sort of negative side, the depression, anxiety, but also on the positive side of actually making our lives work.
Yeah.
So opening up the conversation, the only way we can do it, if we sit in a room and say nothing's going to be created. No possibility is possible.
Yeah.
So language opening it up.
Okay, yeah, and I guess with that, we don't always know, and I think, do you think maybe people open up, kind of go, I need to talk about mental health, but I feel I need to know the answer before I open my mouth, whereas today's about not knowing, and we've talked about this off air, haven't we? We don't know where this conversation's going to go.
No, we don't.
The exciting bit.
Yeah, we don't know what's going to come out.
Yeah.
Yet.
Yeah. Okay, and Lauretta, what about you? What do you see as a possibility?
Well, in addition to what Kevin said, there is something about when you start a conversation, it helps you to clarify, I think, sometimes your own ideas or insights, because you get it out of your head, and you get other people's perspectives, that sort of provokes you to think something different. So in addition to the general point about it being really good to talk about mental health, I think there is something, I'm excited about what I might learn, during the conversation and what insights that might give me personally and professionally.
Yeah. Okay, and can I ask you both just to introduce yourselves, a little bit of a background about what you do, so that we can get a context of, I guess, where the crossover is between this idea of language and mental health. So to stick to our order, let's go to Kevin first, shall we?
All right. I describe myself and the work I do as an ontological coach.
Okay.
That is based looking at who am I being in my life. And I do that with international business people who come to learn language, but also learn who they're being, i.e. powerful or disempowering to themselves in their use of language and communication.
Okay. And where do you see that, where's the crossover do you see with mental health in that?
Well, for me, the crossover is language exists in my mind as far as I know, and as far as I know, everybody's got a little voice in their head. And from my own experience, when I've had periods of not feeling great about myself and not being all I could be, it's kind of started off in my head with conversations with me.
Okay, thank you. And Lauretta?
What Kevin's just said though has reminded me about something, which is about, I imagine in a situation where you're learning a new language, or it's a second language, let's say, that there's something about the opportunity that a different language affords you to express yourself differently, because different languages have got different words for different kinds of emotions. So if you think about your emotional repertoire, your emotional muscles, I guess there are, in English some things are quite limited, and yet in other languages there are many words to describe sort of shades of feeling about a particular thing.
That's right.
Yeah,
yeah, and you don't have to be who you think you always are. And I speak Italian, and when I'm Italian, I'm a different person. My arms start moving, and I'm all over the place.
Or Latin temperament.
Yeah, and it's a kind of a freedom of self-expression that I don't always have when in English.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's my experience of it.
I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that to come out. But, yeah.
This is a whole other topic in itself, isn't it, that we can touch on. But I'm sure we'll kind of it'll kind of link it all in.
But so professionally for me, I'm probably more at the epistemology
Okay.
end of things, which is not to say we don't do, or I don't do work about being or becoming, but there's a lot about knowledge, you know, and how we harness knowledge, transfer knowledge, use it for the better, really. So I work as a freelance consultant for healthcare, mostly in the NHS, and I've got a particular interest in mental health and mental illness, and my work there is largely about helping to design strategy and plans, helping with complex change delivery, and helping to redesign services or activities or systems, really, to deliver the change intended. Yeah.
So you kind of create, for me that's like Facebook. You create a platform, a space, a context, and with systems and structures that can create outcomes that people would really like to have and the NHS are committed to and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a bit of that. Like that would be like, let's say, creating the conditions for something that's intended to happen. But there's also, depending on the nature of the change, you know, some of it is painting by numbers, and you need a pretty, let's say, straightforward
prescriptive
project management approach, which is, and that's when you know both what you're trying to achieve and how to get there. And it might be a simple system, you know, one that's in good order. But if you're in a system that's chaotic or really complicated, so if it's a complicated system, for example, something's happening and you don't know, you probably know you're seeing symptoms, but you don't know what's caused it. So your approach to the change, understanding the change, and therefore how you make things better is different in that situation than a painting by number situation. So part of the work is, I suppose, a bit of that diagnostic about what kind of a system am I in, or are we in, and how do we together get a shared perspective on that, so that together we can think about what the necessary change is and the best interventions to use to bring about what it is we want. So it's a mix of, create the conditions, but it's also, that would be one recipe for a certain kind of situation, and there'll be others for others.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got that real mix between the individual, the internal voice of the individual, and then taking it into the group voice of systems, of organisations that bring that about. And obviously in this situation we're talking about mental health and kind of, you know, from a support and mental illness and things like that as a whole.
And I mean, I think my personal interest in it is more about, because I think there's something very distinct about being human. For me, I would relate a lot of that to our sense of self. And I think that's significantly impacted by your mental well-being. So how you experience your life and the world is really influenced by your mental well-being, and I think we know that when we've had periods where we have been less well or unwell, and I feel that we probably need to talk more so that we understand that more. And so we start to think, well, I've got mental health like I've got physical health. What can I do to mind and improve my mental health? Because I know it will affect how I am in my life and how I experience my life and how other people experience me. I think for me, like that's the personal fascination about it, I suppose.
And I love that what you said there. You know, we know our physical health, and that's more, for me, that's kind of apparent. Whereas my mental health isn't always as apparent as my physical health and looking at myself. So I love the fact that, well, actually, is mental health any different really to being physically healthy? Or is is it part of the same thing? And what you know, one impacts the other.
I think it's a good, because it's a dynamic state, isn't it? Your mental well-being, like your physical well-being is a dynamic state. But as you say, you've got more cues, perhaps, or we're more trained to spot those cues if we're feeling physically ill, and we can have tests, we can have blood tests and x-rays and so on. Whereas, and people have fitness trackers, so people who are very mindful about their physical health or have particular goals, you know, they've got their tracker to sort of help them along. And so you'd be thinking, well, if I could visualize a way to mind and monitor my mental health because I want to improve it, you know, what would that look like? What would be the equivalent to the, I'm doing this, but you know, the fitness tracker that I'd have on my wrist?
Yeah, but I'd argue that we probably we do perceive each other as, like, you know, when you have someone going, oh, you're all right, or, and as much as we try and hide it, those closest to us, and even sometimes those not close to us, can spot it, right? But it's just then knowing what to do, and people can spot there's something wrong. Like if you saw someone who had a limp, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to diagnose where their injury is coming from, but it, you know, it could be right up in their hip or in their toe, and maybe it's that language or learning and or putting that way of understanding or tracking in.
I think though, Kevin and I have discussed this before, but there's like having good mental well-being is not the same as being happy. So you could be unhappy at a point in time, and that would be a very good response to a particular situation.
Yeah, bereavement, for example, you'd be sad, but that would be...
And that's right, or something happens. A relationship breaks up and you feel the pain of that, and I think that's very healthy. It's arguably unhealthy from a mental health point of view to be shut down and functioning fine.
Yes.
You know, and so I think it's an important distinction, isn't it? Because it's back to that thing about your emotional repertoire and your emotional muscles, so to speak. That mental well-being, good mental well-being, is not happiness. Tell us about the book you were reading.
Thanks for bringing that in. I absolutely love it. I'm reading a book called Language and the Pursuit of Happiness. I've just finished it, and it's full of distinctions, and it's ontological in its basis. It's looking at language, it's looking at who am I being. But there's a distinction, and it says, well, happiness is a balance between peacefulness and productivity. And I know in the NHS you have a very similar distinction. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, through public mental health. So the distinction would be that mental well-being is about feeling good and functioning well. So that sense that you, you know, that you can develop your potential, you can work productively and creatively, you can build positive relationships with other people, you can contribute to your community. And that's not to say you're firing on all cylinders all the time, doing all of that fantastically all of the time, but you have the ability, as it were, to do it. So it was really nice that they're like they resonate, they echo, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Those ideas
kind of correlate, kind of dance together a little bit, but they're independent of each other. And that is kind of the work I do, because it's about getting people who come to me for learning English, and they're business people. They're in conflict with their English, and my job in a week is to have them be very peaceful with their English and be even more productive by being peaceful, as opposed to living in a conflict inside themselves, which isn't a very good mental health state to be in, not a great one.
But is that peacefulness about a kind of an acceptance?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? So you're not sort of straining to achieve something or being overly critical of yourself, that inner critic, you know, that you're, so it doesn't mean you're not making a good effort and working hard, but it's a sense of being at ease, which allows you often, doesn't it, to kind of embrace what's coming in the flow, you know, and to see things, as you were saying earlier. Sometimes when you're at ease and more relaxed like that, you notice things. You notice other people, how they seem to be or not. You notice things in your environment differently. And sometimes I find myself that I can think more creatively about a problem that's in front of me, you know, if I'm feeling more at peace or at ease in myself. And definitely the word accepting.
Accepting of, you know what, I didn't get that right. I intended to do something, produce a result, and it didn't work. Okay, rather than labeling yourself as a failure, which is an interpretation of what happened. So being accepting, being at peace with that.
Okay, I think that's a nice place to leave our first part. We're going to come back in a little bit and chat some more about language and mental health. So we're back, part 2 of the Big Idea Show. Today we are talking about language and mental health. And I'm particularly interested in this idea of how our language affects our mental health, but also in contrast, the language we use to describe mental health. So kind of going back both ways, really, I think it affects, doesn't it? But so I'm here with Kevin Batchelor and Lauretta Kavanagh. And Lauretta, so your background is in kind of mental health and kind of change, and you're a consultant in helping people put structures and things like that and make change happen, really. Do you want to tell us a little bit about where are we currently at? What does the NHS do? How do we currently talk about mental health?
Well, a lot of my work in terms of change delivery and about mental health is usually focused on health and care services for people who are mentally ill. And whilst that is vital work, it would be a mistake to think that having ever better responses to people who are mentally ill, including people who are seriously mentally ill, will improve the mental well-being of the whole population, because it won't. In the same way as if on a physical health point of view you focused on only people with cancer and coronary heart disease and respiratory conditions, you are not going to improve the physical health of the whole population. So whilst the NHS of course must prioritise people who are most in need and most vulnerable, we would start then with people with a serious mental illness. We also have to think about taking a longer view, so looking at the mental well-being of the whole population. So one of the things I dislike a lot is that in our society, and it's not unique to England, mental health has become synonymous with mental illness. That hasn't happened to physical health. So often if you ask people about mental health, you hardly get into the conversation before they talk to you about depression or schizophrenia or OCD. So they're talking to you about presentations of mental illness. Yet if you have a similar conversation, you ask somebody how their physical health is, they don't talk to you in response about cancer and heart disease and these things. And I don't quite know exactly how that's happened, that mental health services in England, NHS and council services, are actually mental illness care and treatment services. But it is where it is, and I think there's something about us reclaiming mental health to mean just that. So to think about mental well-being, and we have some good information in this country about what you can do to look after and improve your mental well-being. And there's something called the 5 ways to well-being, and they're a bit like your fruit and veg or your apples for your mind. So they're very simply, it's all low tech, low spec, no gadgets required. The first one is connect, so that's connect with other people. The second one is be active, so what's good for your heart is good for your head. Take notice, something we talked about earlier. So it's like catch sight of the beautiful, you know, when you're driving into Folkestone and you can see the sea and the bridge and all of that. Keep learning is the 4th one. So you could learn a new instrument, just learn a new skill. It doesn't have to be something really sophisticated. Learn how to pot a plant, you know. And then give is the final one. So that's connect, be active, take notice, keep learning, and give. They're the 5 ways to well-being. And they are simple, but they're really well grounded in a lot of research and evidence about what is best for our mental capital as well as our mental well-being.
And how do you think that's kind of coming across at the moment? Because like you said, they're very low tech, low spec, very easy sort of stuff that people could implement in very, like, just for themselves without spending anything. Yet, as you said, they instantly go to talking about depression and schizophrenia. Where do you think the language breakdown is? Maybe is it on the NHS outwards or in society as a whole, where we're not able to explore those? Oh, when was the last time you connected with someone? When you went out and got healthy in a mental health background? Is there anything kind of why are we not doing that more? Why are we not talking about those?
I don't know. I think there's findings, those 5 ways to well-being, and they were published here in 2010. So a long time ago. But there's something perhaps about how that information is made public so that it's seen by people and it's digestible. And so we in everyday life, we get a lot of information, don't we? And some of it sort of sticks with us and some of it doesn't. So there's got to be something about it where the art or the science of how the information is communicated, so that somehow it's in people's consciousness.
Yeah.
And then when, well, for whatever reason, they think, okay, I'm going to do something about that, that they have, it moves into action or insight for action, isn't it? You somehow have information that gives you insight. Well, I can do something about that. You know, and so I don't allow myself, like I would perhaps if I was thinking, oh, I've put on a lot of weight, or I feel very sluggish, or I'm not sleeping well, we'd be thinking, oh, what do I think I could do about that? It's like, but that's too about knowing yourself and thinking it's okay, I need to act proactively, consider this bit of me. And as you asked earlier, didn't you, and we're all one system. You're not a mind with a body or a body with a mind. It's all a complex system, isn't it, about how our minds and our bodies interrelate. So I think if you're feeling depressed, for example, so very low, often you're very tired, you probably don't eat very well, that can affect your motivation, and it can be a vicious cycle. And then physical health issues emerge. And equally, if you've got a longer term physical condition, or indeed a short-term one, it can also affect how you feel about yourself. So if something's happened to you, you've had a car accident, for example, on the one hand, or on the other hand, you've got a long-term physical condition like diabetes, it might provoke you to feel like you can't do things you used to just be able to do. You know, that maybe you have to plan in ways you never had to, more deliberatively, in order to do something you think you should just be able to do, or you could in the past. And I think that can also get you down a bit. It comes back to that sense of who you are.
Yes,
perhaps.
and I love what you said. You know, if you're physically not being well, i.e. a bit out of shape, and you know, I haven't been to the gym for a while, as you can see.
You look great.
But you can ask yourself the question, or you know what to do. Oh, what can I do about my physical well-being?
Yeah.
And it's pretty straightforward, and you're not afraid to talk about that. And for me, from my experience, and also people I've talked to who have had depression or have it right now, they don't ask the question, well, what can I do about this? I haven't met many people who are like, what can I do? And I get the sense that sometimes, not always, but depression is like people often think, and when I was depressed, I felt this, I was at the effect of depression, and that I was powerless to do anything, and asking the question, what can I do about this, never entered my head. But correlating it with the physical bit well-being, it's the natural question to ask, isn't it? What can I do about this? Well, I can go to the gym, I'll get a friend, I'll connect with a friend, we'll go off and I'll set a few goals. But when I experienced depression, and it's like I was at the effect of something that seemed to be invading me, as opposed to I'm at the cause of my mental well-being.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I understand.
That was my experience.
Yeah. No, and I really respect that. And you know, I'm sorry, it was a painful experience.
Yeah, it lasted a few months.
Yeah.
But it's okay now.
But there's a couple of dimensions to that, isn't there? If we keep the parallel with physical health, one is that you don't, for example, overnight become physically, or rarely do you overnight become physically ill or overweight, or whatever these examples we might use are. You kind of know, like you sense it, you can kind of see it. And I suppose my curiosity is, what would be the equivalent then in terms of your mental well-being? So before you even think I'm depressed, because that's a certain point in a journey, isn't it? That you think, that you're noticing things about how you're feeling, how you're seeing things, how you're relating to other people or whatever, that you start to think, it's a bit like that example of, oh, actually, you know what, I am a bit sluggish, I have put on a bit weight. So before you think, you know, I'm obese and I need professional help, you've somehow figured something out before then, so that actually you hold yourself in a good place because you take action earlier. So there's something about that for me, from what you said with the parallel. And the other parallel is that, you know what, it's okay not to be okay. And it's absolutely all right to ask for help. In the same way as if you were physically ill, you would bring yourself to your GP, you might tell a colleague or your family, you know, I'm feeling really rough, and I'm going to go and see the GP.
Yeah.
And few people just decide to go and see the GP, do you? You are at a certain point of feeling quite unwell. You might have felt unwell for days, or something that just keeps recurring before you decide to go there. And I think it should be the same with regard to your mental health. You know, you should also feel it's absolutely fine to ask for help, and it's absolutely fine to be telling people you're doing that.
Yeah.
Because with physical, you know, on the road to obesity, everybody can see it, but they can't always see it in terms of mental health. And I love your 5 ways of
To well-being. Yeah.
to well-being. I was going to say 5 ways of being, but
it's even
5
better.
ways to well-being. Well, maybe it's a daily practice.
Yeah.
Instead, you go to the gym and you do 10 reps, and then you go for a long walk one day, and then you do different things each day. How about, right, Monday, I'm going to see how about connecting, because the message, your message, though, that guide, that recipe, those guidelines, just if they were they could answer the question, well, what do I do about it?
Yeah.
Well, where am I not connecting? Where could I connect? What can I physically do that I haven't done? What new thing could I learn? And I've forgotten the other 2 already, because I'm not...
Be active. We had
Active.
take notice is really lovely. Catch sight of the beautiful.
Yeah. Sort of appreciate and be grateful for just being here, I guess.
We're having this conversation while we've got snow, don't we, in places. But it's things like when the snow comes, everyone's like, oh, it's so beautiful,
Yeah.
you know, and I feel like I'm 10 again and all of that. But actually, we have this kind of variation in the weather every day,
Yeah.
but that we often just don't notice.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We're half asleep some of the time.
Yeah, I think we're hardwired, aren't we, to be we're creatures of habit.
Yes, we are.
You know, so you get in the car, you arrive at work, you
Yeah.
don't always even remember the details of that journey, do you?
Yeah.
Because you're on autopilot to a point.
I noticed my journey home today because I drove through some snow. Yeah.
It's the changes, isn't it? By the sounds of it, snow is unusual.
Yeah.
And that's why we notice and take note.
Yeah.
But the everyday, oh, it's raining again, we don't even comment about it. But okay, I'd like to take a quick break here, and then when we come back, I'd like to touch on, because we've got the kind of action, the things that we kind of should be doing or can be doing.
Could do.
Yeah.
But also, we mentioned about when you have a tangible measure of, oh, I put on an extra stone or whatever as your measure to obesity. But what is it? What ways could we maybe look to identify early signs maybe of mental health, and looking specifically at the language we use? But there you go. That's a little bit of a teaser for what I'd like to come back for after the break. Right, back in a little bit. My guests are chuckling here in the studio. Part 3. They're not behaving on their microphones, so I have to tell them off. So
Mine looks like a hamster.
It is like one of those things, the closer you look at it,
Yeah.
the more it takes on certain forms and shapes, personalities.
see, you're now speaking directly into your microphones, and this is great. I should tell you, just stare at your microphone all the time.
Rather than
Okay.
each other, but
Yeah,
he's
well,
so
we
compelling
were really
over there.
connected
Oh,
with
wait.
each other's eyes.
You're too close now. There we go. I need to
Okay.
take it down. Okay, taking it back onto topic. So I mentioned in the last link we were talking about. I'd like to touch on this idea of how can we recognise when our physical health is beginning to slide. We notice it because we notice a few extra pounds on the scales, or we kind of look that, okay, I don't feel or look how I want to feel. But what is it? What are some of the keys or some of the guides that we can maybe be looking out for in our mental health? And Kevin, you mentioned earlier about kind of the voice in your head and how that is, although we don't maybe speak it out loud, it's the language we use to speak to ourselves. So I want to open up, what ways, when do we notice, and I guess they'll be unique for every individual, but what, I guess we have to look at it as individuals, don't we? Can only look at it like that. What have we noticed personally are the signs going, okay, that maybe my mental, like you'd say, I'm not so healthy today, I've eaten badly.
Sure.
Okay, my mental health has not been as tip-top as I'd like it to be. What can I then do? So I'll bring it together.
So for me, from personal experience and talking to people, it's the language, the conversations in my head and other people's heads have tended to be around the idea that there's something wrong. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my boss. There's something wrong with the world, and I don't know how to respond to that. And I start becoming at the victim of there's something wrong. I've made up or thought that there's something wrong, and then I become the victim of my something wrong, and then I feel bad about it.
Okay.
And I start to feel powerless.
So and this is separate from there's something wrong, as in I think my mental health there might be something wrong, but there's something wrong in the world around me.
Yeah, there's something wrong in the world around me. There's something wrong with me. Why can't I, you know?
Yeah.
And what's the point? And years ago I came across a quote which it's always stuck in my mind. It's our loudest critics. So when you hear people criticizing, it says our loudest critics are those who are bitterly afraid and internally torn in their own struggle for a meaningful fulfillment in life. And I noticed that around the place a lot. It's and we start having this internal conversation, then we start externalizing it. We start complaining. But the key in this also is that there is a sense that I'm unable to respond. I don't know what to do. Like Lauretta said earlier, we know what to do physically, but what we ask ourselves, what can I do? But we don't always have the answers in terms of mental well-being. But if we notice, for me, noticing that those are the sorts of consistent conversations I'm having with myself and then with other people, I think that's some sort of indication when we live in the world of something wrong and making things wrong, and everything we see, we do it actually. I don't think I have great mental well-being when I drive, because if there's somebody driving slowly on the motorway, there's something wrong with that person, and at the same moment, if somebody shoots past me at 95 miles an hour, there's something wrong with that one, and I kind of start making the world wrong. Well, and how am I being, and how do I feel? I start feeling aggressive inside and angry and so that's where it starts for me, noticing that.
Okay, and you say about when it's an internal conversation, then we start vocalizing it, moaning. Would you say, because we talk about with mental health, it's about talking and people encouraging people to talk, would you say, so if we're talking about when do you notice that it started, even if only minor, is that when it starts to come out of your mouth, or is it when that it becomes maybe more significant, or is it mainly in your head?
Usually I get some feelings or not an emotion, because for me an emotion is a reaction to something that happens instantly. So if somebody cuts me up on the motorway, I go "Rah!" and I get angry. That's an emotion. It's a sort of a background mood for me, a constant, like, slow flowing mood of what's the point, and there's a distinction between emotions and emotional reactions and a general mood. And we do tend to live in a world of there's something wrong. If you stand at a bus stop, you won't hear a conversation, well, I really connected with 5 people yesterday and I gave of myself fully. It's like, have you seen the price of peas? There's something wrong with the price of peas. And it's that general mood that's there for a longer time. And that's what I experienced in myself. And that's a sort of it's not a peak and up and down of feeling. It's something that's there when you wake up, and there through the day, and that comes from me from constantly making something wrong. My experience.
Really interesting, because there's for me like 2 vital ideas in that. One is about noticing, and perhaps that is a big distinction between physical and mental health, physical illness and mental illness, in that you can more easily usually see physical illness. So you can have a blood test, you can have an X-ray. Even with the more severe mental illnesses, although neuroscience is developing, you don't have that tangible sight of something that I think you do with regard to physical illness. What I would worry about, though, is that sometimes that might lead people to think, or others, that they're to internalize it, to say, well, I should be able to control this feeling. And that's maybe a double whammy of experiencing mental illness. So not only do you have to live with an experience of being depressed, connected with that, you might feel even worse about yourself, that somehow you couldn't control that.
Yeah.
Either hold it back
Yeah.
or, or come out of it quicker or what
That's
have
right.
you. And I think that that's not there with physical illness. You don't hear people saying, I really regret that I allowed myself to get cancer.
Mm.
They
don't blame themselves or make
no,
themselves wrong.
And I think you should not feel like that either about
No.
mental illness.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes, as you said, Kevin, when you think, sometimes when you look outside, maybe, you have had actually a really bad run of luck. And it's understandable you think the world is against you. But there's something about kind of not always having to own that. As you were saying, there's something about saying, well, okay, how do I find a space like where I think, well, I could learn from that. And you won't learn from it right in the moment because you're going to feel so bad, and in pain or whatever it happens to be, right, in terms of what the experience is. But there's something about that bad things happen, and that's a part of life. It's a part of being human. And the thing is about us, how we respond to that. So the noticing, I think, is quite an interesting distinction, perhaps,
Yes.
between mental and physical health.
Yes.
And I think too an important distinction is to not have that double whammy. It's in the same way as it's all right to be physically ill. We're human, like that's a part of it.
Yes.
It's also all right to be mentally ill.
Yes.
And to ask for help and get help with it.
Yes.
And where do you think is the line between, I guess you mentioned about moaning, like when we notice ourselves
Yeah,
moaning.
really complaining.
Yeah, and then there's also, but we can start moaning about our moaning. Like what you were saying, Lauretta, around then beating ourselves up, that we're beating ourselves up and it's this constant cycle. But where should we, again, going back to the physical health, if you notice someone was limping or kind of had a minor injury or issue, people around them would go to the doctors, go and get it sorted out. And like you've had that for 2 weeks now, you've been limping, go and see someone. But where's the line between calling people out on their moaning, for example? And you may say, well, it's just moaning and that's how they are, but then when do you start to go, right, this is happening for a long time, you never used to moan so much, but now you are, if we're saying that that's potentially a sign for a background noise of kind of deteriorating mental health? Because again, that's language, isn't it? It's very hard to kind of call someone out going, you don't normally talk like this.
Oh, I love a good moan myself, you know.
Yeah, getting something off your
cathartic,
chest,
have a good
that's
moan.
cool, that's great. You feel empowered afterwards, but this constant, continual, repetitive.
That the world is against you.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
But do we we don't have the culture to be able to say, so not many people would say, stop moaning. Because, and I don't think the answer is stop moaning, because that's
No.
like you're saying,
not-
hiding it. But
it's
saying,
not dealing with.
and addressing, and if we are looking out for, like we know the signs to look out for in physical health, and kind of how to check for kind of, breast cancer and all these kind of stuff, and if someone's limping, then there's probably something going on. But should we start calling people on things like that, or do we say, but that's just their personality, they're a kind of pessimistic person?
And some people are, and that's fine, I think.
Sure.
But I think if it's a notable change in personality or temperament of somebody you know quite well, there's something about really just creating the space to have the conversation and to be led by that other person. And that's about you noticing, right? So you notice that person who you know really well. You think, hang on a minute, this is a change, and it's gone on for a week or long, whatever, and then ask. I think that's the thing. Sometimes we just don't ask the other person and then stop talking and listen to what they say in response. Really listen, and don't necessarily try and find solutions, but just let the other person talk it out. Because often there's a value, isn't there? Things are often much bigger in your head than they are when you say it out loud and you talk it through with a friend or maybe not even a friend, you talk it through with somebody. And like I say, it's not like the other person has to be kind of crafting sort of solutions or whatever. They just have to kind of soak it up. And as the time is right, maybe give you some feedback on it, and it can give you a different perspective on the same thing. So it feels lighter, I think, to get out of your head. And then, you may get other perspectives. And yeah, and I think if it's a close or a friend, yeah, I think
or
to,
a professional, you know, when
yeah, just to say
there's-
get help,
it's-
you know, maybe
yeah.
help, somebody talking this through with somebody independent who's a kind of a pro at this stuff, in the same way as you'd go to a physio who's a particular physical health.
And as you
It's
said
just
right at
thing
the
to do.
beginning, talking it out, maybe you get some insights that you hadn't seen before that you don't get when it's in your head and going
Yeah.
around. So yeah, and not to be fixed,
Yeah, and
but
that's-
just to be listened to.
Yeah, and maybe not to say, you know, what is wrong with you,
Yeah.
but rather to
Oh.
say, what has happened?
Yeah.
You know, what's happened
Yeah.
to you? Because that sort of puts it outside the person. So it's not like what's wrong with you, like, which is where we said earlier, that risk isn't there, particularly if you're not feeling great mentally, that you sort of internalize it. You feel crap, and then you feel even worse because you feel you've allowed yourself to feel
Yeah.
crap and
Yeah.
you haven't kind of got on top of this thing.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes if we say, well, what's wrong with you? It sort of reinforces maybe some of that.
Well,
Whereas
you're
if you say,
starting
what
from
happened to
yeah,
you?
exactly. That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you start with what's wrong with you, well, I know. Don't tell me there's something wrong with me, because I already know there's something wrong with me, and I don't need you telling me there's something wrong with me.
And it's pejorative, like
Yeah.
right is the other side of a coin
Oh, yeah.
to wrong.
Yeah.
So by saying there's something wrong with you,
Wow.
it's like, well,
Yeah, but just to say, oh, what happened?
yeah, what happened?
Yeah, what are you experiencing? I'm here to just understand and just to listen to it, not to fix you.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing you can do that's a contribution to a friend, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think one of the things I feel is, having had in my life a couple of people who've committed suicide, is that we often don't think about the impact that we have on other people. And so if somebody is feeling low or somebody is lonely and so on, and you know you're really busy and you're bustling through the office and all the rest of it, you know, for you to say hi to them and just stop for a minute, you know, is nothing really, but it might mean something more to them. And I think sometimes we forget that. We actually forget just about the impact that we can have on the people who are around us. Yeah. And
Yeah, we can. And we can have impact by asking questions, using language and listening. And
Yeah.
if somebody is making, you know, say, what happened? You say, you know, there's something else on the other side of living in a world of there's something wrong and you're a failure. There's peace. And then when you're peaceful, we go back again, you can be productive. And we sometimes forget that we get so caught up in our stories and our view of the world, we forget that there may be some other views of our experiences that we're having that might
Yeah.
give us access to something that we really would cherish and welcome and want in our lives. So the possibility of being peaceful or self-expressed or powerful. Because I get that that's what I want in my life, just to be self-expressed, peaceful, loving and healthy.
Yeah.
There we go. That's a lovely note to finish this section with. We'll be back in a little bit. So we are drawing to a close our discussion for today. It's been absolutely lovely to have Lauretta Kavanagh and Kevin Batchelor in, and we've been talking about mental health and language and the point where they cross, where they merge, really, haven't we? So let's just conclude, shall we? What are the take-home messages that you have both kind of experienced from today, or anything you'd like to kind of suggest or recommend, invite people to kind of do going forward? If this is something that they're exploring, they'd maybe like to look into a little bit more. We've got a hand up, go on then,
I
Kevin.
I felt like a 5-year-old then back at school. What I'm really taking home is the 5 ways to well-being,
Yes.
and that can become a mental well-being fitness plan, and that I can have one each day of the week, Monday to Friday,
Yeah.
and actually make it a goal and commit to it.
Yeah.
That I can then go, okay, I'm going to connect with somebody I wouldn't normally connect with today. I'm going to give somebody something today that I wouldn't normally give. And it could be a compliment. It doesn't have to be money or anything like that. I'm going to do something I haven't done. You know? And what I'm taking away is I'm going to take those on and
Yeah.
have fun with them
Yeah.
and start telling people about them.
Yeah. I think you might have to come back and tell us how you get on.
Yeah. What fun.
That'd be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And like you said, it's come up a few times, hasn't it? Intentional, being responsible, taking commitment. You've said it out loud.
Yes.
Therefore, it's going to happen. You are your word. I know you're your word.
Yeah, I am my word, because that's what I really, really get. Where is my power? I smoked for 40 years and I tried to give up smoking, and I was looking for reasons, and then I really understood that my thoughts, I'm not my thoughts, because they pass very quickly. And, you know, thoughts I had half an hour ago before this are not the same as they are now. And my feelings generally follow my thoughts.
Yeah.
But what gives me power in the world is what I say and commit to. So I honor myself as my word. And I did that for smoking. And recently I've said, you know what, I'm going to lose some weight. And I've cut down on how much I drink. And I'm just being my word. And it's absolutely, I'm not trying to do anything differently. I'm just being my word. And that is called, in my book, called integrity. Being whole and complete, nothing wrong, and that's where my power is.
Yeah.
So I'm taking that home too.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Well, I've enjoyed the conversation a
Me
lot.
too.
Yeah. I think we might have to have a sequel. And yeah, I need to reflect, a bit, I think. But I think the 5 ways to well-being, because I've tried myself to be much more mindful about them. And intentional, but you've got to hold them lightly, as you say, Kevin. It's not meant to be like going to the gym 5 days a week or something. It should be fun. It should be a light thing to do. And I was just wondering if, for people who listen to the podcast, if it might have, influenced you to think about some of these issues, and you'd like to talk them out with somebody who might be a pro in the field. We do have a great mental health telephone helpline service for Ken and Medway. It's 24/7, and the number is 0800 107 0160. And you can also Google Live Well Kent, and that will bring you to a very good website where you can find access to resources to help you to look after your mental well-being, as well as resources to approach if you think maybe you're not so good and you need to ask for help.
Great.
Okay. Brilliant. Lauretta, Kevin, thank you very much indeed. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Liu.
Liu.
Thank you.
Bye.